Hi everyone. On June 13th, the Holy Orthodox Church celebrates the memory of a tremendously gifted saint named Antimos of Iberia. He eventually became the Metropolitan of Wallachia in Romania. But he started his life in southern Georgia, and not a lot is known about him except he was an exceptionally brilliant person. He knew Turkish, Arabic, Slavonic, Georgian, Romanian. He knew many, many languages. He was very much educated in the natural sciences of the day, and also someone who was very well acquainted with literature. So much so that he took a real interest in printing, which was just really coming to its own in that area during that time in the late 1600s and early 1700s. But it had started many, many years before. And also, St. Antimos was someone who was supposedly brilliant in calligraphy. He was quite the artist and did many, many things with marvelous calligraphy all through his life. Well, not too long, and we don't know much about his early life, but not too long after he had begun developing all these many, many talents, he was made the abbot of a monastery in Romania. Of course, Georgia and Romania, there were influences going back and forth during that time, a lot of cross-pollination, if you will. But St. Antimos is someone who really took to the Romanian people. He was someone who loved them greatly, and so not long after his elevation to the abbacy of a monastery, he was also elected a bishop in Romania, finally getting the title of Metropolitan of Wallachia. He was someone who was so enamored with the Romanian people that he would do all that he could to help them throughout his life. He was someone who took other people and became one of them, as if he was a native. And the love that he had for them was absolutely returned by all of the people. They extolled his virtues night and day for many, many years because they knew how talented he was, all the things that he could do, his vast intellect, but most of all because he was a very spiritual and loving pastor and was going to help them in any way he could in order to establish further the Orthodox faith, which was always under attack at that time by the Turks, who had made incursions into both Georgia and into Romania as well. After a while, after being Metropolitan for so many, many years, he had also begun to declare the independence of Romania from Constantinople. Now, why was this a big deal at the time? Well, you have to remember that the Ottoman rule, which had so crushed Constantinople and its environs, was also beginning to encroach on other countries as well. He did not want this. He was very much opposed to it. And so after the Turks ended up killing several princes in Romania, they took one of these people from the Fanar, who was a Greek, but who was also very much a politico and who was very much interested in furthering the efforts of the Ottomans in order to stabilize his own position. Well, this man turned against Metropolitan Antimos. And in fact, he not only turned against him, he tried to declare him absolutely unfit to be a monk and to remove him from any sort of authority in his bishopric at all. Unfortunately, this tactic worked. So although St. Antimos had written Patriarch Jeremias of Constantinople, all of the bishops there voted against him because they were so controlled by the authorities at that time. And in fact, after they had reduced him to really less even than a simple monk, they were going to send him to the monastery of St. Catherine on Mount Sinai. Now, normally you might think, well, that's not such a bad thing if you're stripped of all these things to be sent to a holy place like that. But The fact is, he never made it, because on the banks of a river one night, some Turks found him and stabbed him to death, and then cast what remained of his body into the Tunka River. Thus ended the career and the leadership and the spiritual light of one of the most remarkable Metropolitans that have ever been in Romania, and one of the most remarkable of the early Georgian saints. Although the Georgians regarded him as a saint and martyr for many, many years, finally, in 1992, the Romanian Church also glorified St. Antimos, the Metropolitan of Wallachia, and put his own feast day in the month in which he was killed, in September. Nevertheless, the older date, and the one that the Holy Orthodox Church generally recognizes on an international level, is June 13th. This is a story which I find particularly inspiring, because there have been so many saints in the Orthodox Church that were absolutely brilliant, really the most brilliant people of their age. Could anyone compete with St. Basil the Great, or St. Gregory of Nazianzus, or St. Gregory of Nyssa, or St. Gregory Palamas? And there's a host of others that were really the most brilliant lights of the time. And yet, this brilliance led not to pride, but to piety, when they submitted all of their gifts to Jesus Christ and to the encouragement of his body, the church. This is certainly what St. Antimos did. This is certainly what guided him his entire life, to use all of the gifts that God had given him in order that he may further the cause of the church. Would that more of us today, especially those who are gifted with so many astounding gifts of the intellect, of artistic skills, and many others, would that they also would turn to Christ and find a greater fulfillment of the gifts they had been given than anything that the world would have to offer. So let's remember St. Antimos today as someone especially graced by our Lord Jesus Christ, and who can inspire all of us to offer everything we have to him. Bye-bye.